Scientific Advisory Service, to enable county and district controllers to understand the scientific information being fed through post-attack by the UKWMO. Each bunker would have an individual or team of scientific advisors. Clive Hextall was a scientific advisor within the Leicestershire County Council (LCC) emergency planning team. Bill Kind was the brains behind the scientific side, extrovert and eccentric but very good. He was also Chief Medical Officer for Leicester. He kept all of us under control, including the LCC people who had very little experience or knowledge of civil defence (CD), except for Wally Bainbridge and Keith Beckwith. Miss Graham dropped out within a couple of years, as did most of those listed. Myself, John Hawkes and Dick Thompson were the ever-presents who participated in most of the training and exercises to the bitter end, i.e. when it was officially mothballed again. This time it looks for good. Towards the end, the Home Office carried out a poll amongst us. The outcome of it gave us no hope. Nearly all the scientific advisors' SAs were very elderly. There was no natural intake of newcomers or the challenge or anything else to make it interesting for new people. 1 or 2 people joined but did not stay too long. I stumbled into it again through being in Rainit and being a CD member in the 60s. I remember going to the old control room under the EMEB offices in Charles Street, as it was then, in 1986, and finding some messages on the desk that I had written in 1968. Back to the people. Jack Smart was in the CD with me in the 60s and had rejoined the new SA organization, but again he only lasted a year or two. As I say, most were very elderly, and even the simple teleprinter messages during an exercise were too much for most to handle. The operation was getting more efficient and technical all the time. The introduction of the message switch system just about finished the older ones off. Even that was pretty pathetic. There were no PCs available, members used their own. There were all sorts, including BBCs, early Amstrads, and that one that became a games machine, Commodore. I joined the Scientific Advisors Microcomputer Users Group (SAMUG) and wrote an article advising that all emergency planning departments and SAs should standardize on the IBM PCs, which they did, of course. That was the end of SAMUG, as they were anti-IBM PC. I asked Clive Hextall to explain something of the effects of nuclear weapons. The radiation depended on the bomb power, distance from ground zero, and most importantly whether it was an air or ground burst. The ground burst being the dirty bomb and causing the fallout. We had plastic computers, slide rules, to help us with the calculations. The weather conditions, wind speed and direction had to be known to plot the fallout area. One might have to sit tight for a week before entering a fallout area, and the exposure would be restricted to a time. Personnel would carry a personal dosimeter to record the dosage. 75 hour, I think, was your top limit. It would be weeks before any sort of normal activity could be resumed. Radiation is carried as fallout dust. There would be a near area where the bigger chunks of contaminated debris would fall, and the downwind area, which we had to predict based on the weather conditions. This area could easily be 20 to 30 miles downwind from GZ. There is no medication to counteract radiation, only time or a 3 feet thick concrete bunker. As listed, John Hawkes was one of the scientific advisors with Leicester City Council and would have been required to be in the council bunker on Charles Street. My children had grown up and moved away, and so I was fully prepared to take my place in the bunker. We held training exercises every 6 months, and I attended training courses at the Civil Defence College at Easingwold, which were always very good. The understanding of and the power of nuclear weapons was always evolving, and so we had to keep up to date. His partner at Leicester City Council was John Smart. I had time on my hands, so I wished to do something useful. I was in the forces during the war and so felt I could contribute. Dr. Kind was in charge of it all and was a very clever man and was always there to put us right. If there was ever any doubt over a calculation, he would always know the answer. He could set up exercises in no time at all. Without him, I think we would have only just coped. I left around 1988 as the constant exercises became quite boring. Also, technology had caught up with me as we began to use computers and I had very little understanding of them. My nearest experience was the use of teleprinters in the signals service. I remember attending courses at Easingwold which I would say were very good. On the last night of a course we would all attend a meal in what can only be described as an officer's mess. It was all quite formal and patriotic, with toasts held to the Queen and an exact behaviour expected during the meal. I hadn't even reached the position of Lance Corporal in the army, so it was quite a culture shock sitting dining with someone of the rank of squadron leader. We even had a formal toast when the college president took his seat, so you can imagine a lot of port and wine was drunk on the last night. If there had been a build-up to war, one would have been required to be in the city council bunker, but I could not have left my wife and family behind. Roy Thompson was scientific advisor to Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council. I was in the scientific service for around 10 years, right up until stand down in 1991. A work colleague got me interested as I was a physicist by training. In the event of war, one expect I would have been required to be at the Hinckley Council HQ. I was fully prepared to go as I felt it was my duty. I remember attending courses at Easingwold and Cambridge which were extremely good. I think the science of the effects of the weapons was pretty well understood. We had to plot bomb burst locations and elevation using a computer slide rule, one of which I still have at home. This was from information sent through by the UKWMO. I think all of the county advisors were very good and superbly led by Dr. Kind. Wally Bainbridge was also very good and set up some excellent exercises. We held monthly meetings between all of the Leicestershire advisors and also met with our counterparts in other counties at Nottingham for a day on certain Saturdays. Exercises in the main were held at County Hall but occasionally involved county standby at Hinckley. Clive Hextall really pushed the technology side and use of computers, but I never really got involved with them. I was still able to do my job without them, and I got particularly good at casualty estimating. I didn't really dwell on what I was dealing with as I was more concerned with the practical side of it, the calculations, etc. It was a job that needed doing like any other.